Dual cameras have basically become the norm over the past year of phone design. From wide angles to portrait effects, every company has a different take on what that second lens should be and do. The recently released OnePlus 5T has forgone the telephoto and wide angles though for a second standard wide aperture lens, which they claim is optimised for low light. So with that in mind, I think it's time for a low light shootout. And what better way to put it to the test than a comparison with the tried and tested Galaxy S8, which has constantly impressed me in the past with low light situations. Straight off the bat here we've got some really different exposures from both cameras. Over on the S8 things are looking a lot brighter in general and the greens of the grass really do stand out in the picture. Despite that, it's blown out a lot of the fairy lights hanging from the building and trees. On the OnePlus side we've got a much darker photo, but the highlights are much more controlled. The fairy lights look a lot nicer in this photo. Despite that darker exposure from the 5T, I really do prefer the image from it here. It's captured the scene I remember looking at the time a lot better than the S8 did. So this next one was a bit of a strange one. No matter how many times I took this photo of the 5T, I would either get an overexposed image or an underexposed one, and if I'm honest, neither of them are very nice at all. However, when I pulled out my S8, it really did knock it out the park with this one with a really nice exposure on the difficult image. Not only is that exposure a lot nicer, the Samsung sharpness really shines through in this shot with much better definition on the bricks surrounding the windows. Very similar pictures from both of the cameras here. It's only when you zoom in can you see the S8's done a slightly better job at keeping the tree branches a bit more defined than the 5T. However, the 5T proves again that it handles those highlights better, with the bright sign over on the left here nicely controlled and rendered, while the S8 has kind of mushed it all together. While this photo doesn't look massively different off the bat, apart from the orange hue coming from the Samsung on the left buildings, it's actually in the details where we see the bigger differences between the two photos. Zooming in, the S8 has kept a lot more detail in the bricks above the window here, while the OnePlus has pretty much smoothed out all of it. Towards the middle of the photo the same is true. You can see the railings and letters really well here on the S8, while the OnePlus doesn't really show off much of it at all. Zooming back out, it is more difficult to tell these small details, but I think I prefer the S8's image here. Now these leaves were blowing in the wind, so you'll have to forgive the focus on these photos. However, the colour difference is the main reason I kept it in. The 5T keeps things looking really natural, while the S8 in classic Samsung fashion has jumped up the greens quite a bit, which while unlifelike I actually prefer in this instance. The darker areas of the photo are more contrasty and appealing in the S8's too, while the 5T looks a little flat. Green plants aside though, the 5T really brings it home in this photo. The blue and whites have so much more definition than the S8, which has got an overall orangey glow to the whole photo, which I guess is most likely coming from a nearby streetlight, but it's nothing on the 5T's photo here, which has taken a much more natural and better looking image. Another winner from the OnePlus here. It's done a much better job at keeping the exposure under control, while the S8 seems to have blown out the lights in the trees by comparison. What's interesting as well is the amount of orange the S8 has picked up on the streetlight on the left, and how well the OnePlus has managed to keep that under control. Again, not a huge difference in this one, but generally a softer overall image coming from the 5T. Taking a look at the sign, you can see the S8 has managed to retain more detail and kept noise down nicely too. As an overall shot though, I prefer the 5T's slightly darker exposure here, as the S8 is almost bridged into overexposure towards the top of the image. This photo is another example of how well the 5T handles those highlights compared to the S8. If you take a look at the blue sign here, it's a lot clearer on the OnePlus, whereas the S8 is overexposed, making everything look a little bit worse. However, the S8 has produced a lot less noise in this shot. There isn't a huge difference between the two photos here on the surface, but look a little closer and you can see the S8 has kept more detail in the water, whereas things get really muddy quite quickly on the 5T. The Halford sign in the background is easier to make out on the S8's rendition too. So overall, the 5T really did impress me actually. I've always found the S8 to be one of the best low light shooters, but it was nice to see the 5T hold its own and even best the Samsung in some areas. Colour reproduction in these low light situations appeared more natural on the 5T, and the controlled highlights in some images was really great to see. It didn't quite match the S8 in terms of detail and sharpness, and struggled in some conditions where the S8 breezed it, but overall it's done a really good job. Phones are never going to give us those stunning results in the dark, so it's important to remember that what we're getting out of these two phones considering sensor size is actually pretty awesome, But like I always say, I don't think you'll be left wanting with either of these cameras in your pocket. Both have done an admirable job in tough conditions. So that rounds us off for this comparison. Let me know in the comments below if you think the 5T bested the S8, or does Samsung still have one of the best cameras of 2017. Thanks for watching this video, and I will see you all in the next one.